Hello everyone, I'm Ravi Verma. I'm co-founder and CTO of Soft Technologies. I have around more than decades of software industry experience, mainly into R&D domains, and I have worked with tech giant companies like GE, Samsung, and Baxter. I have experience with the development of from cloud applications to desktop applications, and currently I'm mainly into software solution architect role. So today we'll be seeing we'll be starting with installing and configuring Kubernetes in Azure so that you guys can utilize it, and whenever you need, you can start and configure and then play around it. Moving to the agenda. So while configuring, we'll be going with the agenda is like we'll be installing Azure CLI tool, which will be required to communicate with Azure for the configuration and communicating and getting some information from Azure portal. Then we'll be installing Kubernetes client tool, which will be used to communicate with Kubernetes cluster that will be used for that. Then we'll be going through Kubernetes cluster creation and configuration using Azure portal. And then we'll be connecting, and then we'll be running basic commands and then try to get some information from the cluster. Okay, so without wasting much time, we'll start with the installing and then we'll go ahead. So I'll be coming out of slide mode. Sorry. So here we can go to this path and we can download the latest version of the client, Azure client, which I have downloaded. Currently it's Azure client 2.43.0 and I'm going to install it. Okay, so let it install. For that, we'll be needing a Azure account. For that, we need to go to Azure portal and we can. So the link is portal.azure.com. So if you guys don't have any account, you can log in, create an account. $200 few free credit will be assigned, and then you can utilize that one to configure and test all those Kubernetes related stuffs. Currently, I have a few subscriptions. I'll be using that. We need to register it, and we'll be needing a subscription to create any kind of resources in Azure. That is mandatory to communicate and with Azure. So I have installed it. Fine, that is done. Now we'll be. I'm opening command prompt. Then we'll see. Okay, we need to log. Before logging, we'll install. So you can see it is downloading kubectl, which is version is 1.26.0. It is the latest stable version on the Kubernetes. So it downloads and then it installs so that it can be used to communicate with the cluster. So this is the first command. We need to run it. It can be installed. You can download and install it separately as well. It's not necessarily that need to be downloaded and installed using this Azure CLI command only. But it is easier to do this way, so that's why I'm following this way. Okay, so once that is done, okay, let it download and install. Meanwhile, we'll try to create a new cluster, and then we'll after that we'll be connecting and then seeing like what all the things has been created. So we need to come, okay, so first of all you need to log in. You will be landed to this screen, and then we need to go to create resource. For that we'll come to containers. Then if you see, the first option is Azure Kubernetes service. So this is a Kubernetes service provided by Azure. This one we'll be using to create a cluster. Okay. Click on create. Okay, taking a bit time. Fine. So here, as you can see, I have few subscriptions. So when you log in with your free account, you'll see a free tier will be coming as a subscription. You need to select that. You can select and then you can proceed. So I'll be selecting one of mine. Here resources, we need to create a resource group. Resource group is nothing but a logical kind of collection of all the resources within that, like whatever we are going to create in Azure, all those things will be coming and forming under one of the logical grouping. So that's where we need to create a group. So I'll just write it demo Azure AKS. This is the cost, like cluster, like it is based on the availability and all, where and all, like how many availability zones we want to set up. For testing and all, we can select, we like for now it is dev testing, it is only 1 week, like no availability zone is required, like one availability zone is fine. So this cluster name we would like to give, I'll give demo AKS cluster. All other things will keep it default. So I'm not giving any availability zone. So as we are just running for testing, but for production it is required, very much required. It is kind of replicas it creates like on the different data centers. So how many replicas for production? It's very much required. Here we have a Kubernetes version. If we can see, like by default these are the options provided by Azure. We can select, so we will take the latest version, whatever it is providing. All other things will keep it default. Here we can select like node size. Like node is basically a machine, a virtual machine connected to cluster on which the pods, like actual workloads run on. So we can select what all the node types, how many nodes we want, that can be configured here. So if we click on size, so here we have like most used options we can see. So these are the CPU, like CPU types, and how many virtual CPUs are there, what's the RAM attached to that, how many data disks we can connect to it, maximum IO operations, how many we can do, and then temporary storage, like what is the temporary storage, it will be attached by default to that when we select. And the premium storage like SSD and all premium storage will be there, and this is the cost, like how much will it cost when we run it. So to just test it, what we can do, any one of them we can select. Like suppose I'm selecting this one, 2 virtual CPUs, 8 GB of RAM will be attached, and 16 GB temporary storage will be attached to this one. Okay, so here we have option for auto scale mode. Like if you select it auto scale, so what happens when it goes out of resource and we get new pods and new workloads to be deployed, it automatically auto scales. So basically minimum is the 1. When it requires, it will create 2, 3, 4 and up to 5. So this is the maximum what we want, and this is the minimum. So this one also I'll keep it default for now, but yeah, you can, based on your need, you can change it. So it can go up to 5 for now, and minimum it will start with the 1. node. Okay, so here it is the agent pool. Agent pool is the kind of nodes, node pools. So in Azure, it is like number of similar kind of machines, which is called pools. It is attached. So Azure is having two kinds of pools. One is called system pool, and another one is called user pools. So at least minimum one system pool should be there, like minimum one machine with the mode system should be required. So and other user kind of mode we can create as many as we want based on the need, but minimum system node is required. This is required for running critical Kubernetes related resources. So we'll leave it for now as it is. We'll not be changing anything. We'll see few of the options. If you see node count, it is 1 to 5. And here if you see, like by default it is having 110. It means on this particular node we can deploy up to 110 pods. It will not take more than that. Other things I'm keeping it default. We have now access option, like how we want to configure cluster and how we want to access the cluster. So if you see, we have a couple of options: local accounts with Kubernetes are back, Azure AD, and Azure AD and Azure are back. So we'll be keeping default only, because if you select other one, we need to have Azure AD account and that we need access. So in that case, what will happen? It will be more secure. It will be authorizing and authenticating your request based on the Microsoft Azure AD accounts. By default, we'll keep it Kubernetes only. Now we have networking options. So if you see, it is having two networking options. Azure, this is the default one, KubeNet. It is provided by Kubernetes. The second one is Azure CLI options. It is having, if you want to configure or control more granularity of the networking, it can be done. So if I select this one, if you can see, now it is providing options for different subnets of the pods, like if any pods are created, like in which range they'll be getting IPs and all, so that we can have. We can keep it default for now. This is like more advanced version of the controlling of the networking. I'm keeping it default. Okay, load balancer, by default it creates a load balancer. So load balancer is the kind of front end of the cluster. Whenever we get any request from the outside network, outside world, so first of all it hits the load balancer and then it enters into the cluster. Load balancer balances the request, like if we have couple of nodes. So suppose we have 10 nodes and all 10 nodes are running similar kind of applications, or so wherever it is needed, it will load balance all the requests to all the nodes within the cluster. I'm keeping a default. Enable private cluster, I'm keeping a default, not enabling, because if once you enable this private cluster, we will not be able to connect it directly. It will be hosted in a private network. So to connect to that cluster, we need to have another set of machine or one virtual machine, which is having access to that internal network, and that machine we need to connect it from outside, and internally it will communicate. So I'm not doing that. Is a advanced configuration. I'm keeping it default. Set of authorized IP ranges, basically it is used to like whitelisting the IPs. These are the only IPs are allowed to connect to the cluster. All other IPs will be discarded, like when we try to run a kubectl command. I'm keeping it default. These are the network policies basically. So most of the cases Calico is used. It's a famous one, and we use it. Azure provides its own network policy as well, but that is applicable only if we select Azure CLI. I'm keeping Calico. Basically, Calico network policy, it is a framework kind of thing. It controls how the nodes or the pods, basically the pods can communicate to each other or not. That kind of controlling we can do using network policy. Okay, so I am keeping all other things as default integrations. I'm keeping a default. Here we can give any names of our choice just to tag all the resources, whatever resources has been created. So it will create agent pool and then Kubernetes service. So I can give it demo. I just key value pair. Then we'll review and see like if anything need to be modified. It will let us know. Okay, meanwhile it is reviewing. Let's see if we have solved. Okay, yeah. So we have tool installed. We need to log in with Azure to access the cluster. So, okay, all done. Let's hit on click. It will create. So it will take a couple of times, like a couple of minutes and all it will take to create the cluster. Meanwhile, what we'll do, let's log in with Azure. So the command is az login. Yes, we can see now. Yes, so the deployment is completed now. As we can see, it is completed. A cluster is created. Now we'll connect to cluster and try to run few commands and see the status. So as we can see, now it is fine. And let's go to connect to cluster. We have few options, like few of the commands we need to run it to so that our client, whatever we just installed, should be able to communicate to cluster. So the first command is basically, it is telling to connect to this subscription in which we created our cluster, to connect to that so that we can download the credentials for the particular subscription, and then we should be able to communicate with the cluster. So this one first I need to run. So it switched to a subscription which we created a cluster. Now we need to get the credentials. So this will download the credentials to our local system, which allows us to communicate to cluster. So basically, like kubectl commands, we will be using these credentials to communicate to cluster. So I had downloaded it, but I'll try to download again. Yes, so now it is downloaded and merged. Now we are good to go for getting the status, communicating with the AKS cluster and all Kubernetes things. Now it's ready. So let's first run first command to get how many nodes and all it is created. So kubectl get nodes. We'll get the list of nodes created by the cluster. I created another cluster. So as we can see, we have 3 clusters ready, which is role is agent, like we would be able to run our workloads on these many nodes basically. So this is agent pool and these are the 2 user pools it created. So now we'll see like if any deployments are there. So by default it will have few deployments in which like the Kubernetes main components which will be running. So those components run under kube system namespace. So we'll be able to see like those many, like how many pods are running under that one, how which services are running under that. For that, we can run kubectl get pods name space kube system. So we can see these many pods are running under kube system namespace. Same command can be run with only n option. So it's all up and running. And if you want to see all the deployments under this one, we can run the these commands to see like what all the things are running currently. So let's run it. kubectl get deployments, all namespaces. kubectl get sorry, all namespaces. These are the deployments currently running. So that's it. Yes, we successfully configured our AKS cluster and we are able to communicate from our local command line tool. In later sessions, we'll be seeing like we'll be interacting more like deployments and all we'll be doing on the cluster and managing the clusters, how all the things. Please feel free to contact us on contact@imesh.ai. Thank you.